Okay. So, good evening, everybody.
Good
And
evening. Evening.
I'm very, very happy on behalf of the Advertising Club Bangalore to welcome all of you to this very interesting session about making ideas work. Um, I was initially wondering how to introduce these three gentlemen. I looked at their CVs. It'll take about two hours, I think, minimum to read them out. So I decided not to do that. And I just thought I'd tell you a little about to them and then request SG to take over and moderate the session. The idea uh, of the Ad Club Bangalore is to have a lot of these very interesting webinars and sessions talking about various things that are happening in our industry. And today we thought we'd talk about making ideas work. And we have three great ideators with us because we believe, and this is also my personal belief, that ideas don't come easily anymore. And I think this is really a time when we need fresh ideas and fresh thinking. So that is the purpose of this webinar today. Let me introduce Sridhar Ramanathan. Uh, he is, Sridhar, I am going to go away from your CV. He is actually the father of direct marketing in this country. Always looked up to him as one of the people who had the foresight to see that direct marketing was the future. He was a director in Ogilvy, a very strong Ogilvyite, if I can call him that. And for the last 20 years, he's been running this very interesting consultancy called Ideas Are Us, where he helps people, or in his own words, break or remove the cobwebs from their brain and actually begin to think. And I've heard about some of his sessions, which I understand are very, very interesting. So Sridhar, next time you're in Bangalore, we're going to meet. I've never met him face to face, though he's been my Facebook friend for years. But I'm so honored that he's with us today. And one of the things he told me about himself, of course, he's an author and all of that. But the interesting thing he told me about himself is that he currently enjoys washing vessels since COVID. And the reason is that he can see instant results. And I think that's what ideas today need. They need to see practical results. And I think Sridhar's going to talk about that. The other Sridhar, Sridhar Ramanujam, and I go back 40 years. Most of my students say they've never born at that point, but Sridhar, yeah. So he and I go back a long way. He's one of my dearest friends. We started life together at IIM Bangalore. He's a distinguished alumni of IIM, a professor, and he's helped build many agencies in his career, including Mudra, R.K. Swami, Pratibha, before he set up Brandcom 20 years ago. Ardent cricketer. In fact, if you get him onto that subject, he doesn't stop talking about it. And what I like about Sridhar is his amazing youthfulness. He's always thinking and learning. And I believe that that's a great, great quality to have today. What can I say about Shubhabrata Ghosh? That he's forgotten his name. We all call him SG. I think he's forgotten it too. One, he was my boss at Sakshi. And I always remember that he's a person who taught me how to make presentations. And those days we were not kind to people. He tore my first presentation into bits, every single slide. After that, I realized what he was saying. I've learned so much from him. He's again one of my dearest friends. He also helped build various agencies, including Low Lintas, as it was called then, Rediffusion. He was in Ogilvy, and then with Saatchi. He runs a very, very successful consulting firm today called Celsius 100. Passionate about automotive technology. I've never seen anyone who knows more about product design. His current passion is all about EV. The joke about SG is that his permanent address is seat 13D on all Indigo flights. And for young ladies in the audience, are you seeing the striking resemblance to Daniel Craig? It's increasing by the day, SG. Right, that made him blush. That makes me so happy. Without further ado, I'll ask SG to take over and moderate the session. Just a couple of housekeeping details. Please mute your mic so there's no disturbance in the background. Any questions that you want to ask, put it on the chat box so that we will curate it. SG will curate it at the end of the session and get as many of them answered by the panelists. And before like and kill me, please do become members of the Ad Club Bangalore. Our website is adclubbangalore.net. So welcome, gentlemen. I'm honored to have the pleasure of welcoming the three of you. SG, you're all yours now. Thank you.
Mala, thanks a lot for your eloquent introduction to all of us. And rather embarrassing introduction to me. Last part about Daniel Craig. Be that as it may, this has never happened before. The two Sridhars on the same platform. At least to my knowledge, and I have been in this industry for about 40 years, it has never happened that the two are Sridhars. As if Sridhar is not confusing enough, both have the same initials, R. Sridhar. So how did we kind of get over this confusion? So one became Ogilvy Sridhar, the other became Mudra Sridhar. So I'm reminded of a conversation that I heard in a train in Bombay. And those days I used to work in Lintas. I was going from Vile Parle to Bombay and this to Church Gate. And so this is a conversation. I say, Siemens Ramaswamy's daughter is getting married to Philips Krishnamurti. So that is how, these two characters are, associated with their agencies because they built these agencies from scratch. And like Mala, you said, Sridhar is the father of direct marketing in India. But there are many other things I need to tell people about. So I met Sridhar's legend much before I met Sridhar. I am talking about Ramanathan Sridhar, the Ogilvy Sridhar. And the legend was that Sridhar started direct marketing in India with two other people, Murthy, a dog, and Sridhar. To date, I have not figured out how that started, so maybe Sridhar will, enlighten us today. And my encounter with Ramanathan Sridhar, I still remember I used to work for Rediffusion. My office was on Richmond Road. And he actually came to sell me the membership of KGA, which I refused. Can you imagine that I refused the membership of KGA, which was some paltry, some 25,000 rupees? Because those days, this place where KGA is currently used to be back of beyond. And so I thought, who's going to go and play golf there? Anyway. So welcome to both of you. I think I'm going to start with 3 stories so that we can kind of set up the session. So the session is divided into 4 parts. The first part is unlocking the mind for ideas. Second is to getting a buy-in for the idea. Third is busting mental blocks, scalability. So there are 4 sections. But before I start the first section, I must tell you, there's a guy called Edward D. Bono. I don't know how many of you have heard about Edward D. Bono. Edward D. Bono was part of a committee in my previous agency, Saatchi & Saatchi. And we had a prize for the greatest idea in the world every year. And in one of those seminars, Edward D. Bono said, where do ideas come from? So he said, look, the smallest part of the mind is I know what I know. That is the smallest part of the mind, and it is defined as what we call a comfort zone. You're very comfortable living in that I know that I know. There is another part of the mind, which is why research agencies exist, which is I know that I don't know. So therefore, IMRB, MARC, TNS, etc., etc. But the biggest part of the mind is I don't know that I don't know. That is the part where discovery happens. And he gave me a very interesting definition of what is a great idea. He said a great idea is something that connects to unconnected things profitably, right? Which means that it's not about just only the connection, but it also has to make business sense. So, how many of you have heard this name George Crumb? George Crumb actually invented something that everybody consumes. Everybody whoever is there today, many people are there, maybe 87 people are there today. George Crumb is the inventor of the potato chips. And the potato chips was basically a revenge because he served French fries to someone and that guy basically didn't like the French fries or was cursing him. So he took a revenge by giving him this sliced potato deep fried and people just loved it. And it remained a restaurant serving for many, many years till a lady by the name of Laura Scudder, who was trying something else to figure out a paper which would not allow air to pass, and that was a waxed paper. So she said, hey, why not package the potato chips in that waxed paper bag? And that was the birth of $1 billion industry. Accident. So do all ideas start with accidental discoveries? Like, for example, the Post-it adhesive started as an accident. There's a guy by the name of Mr. Silver who invented that adhesive, which was supposed to be used for aircrafts. And it didn't work. Many years later, 10 years later, a guy called Art Fry wanted to stick his hymns. He was a church singer. He wanted to stick his hymns at the back of the chair in front. And he used that adhesive and it stuck. And then when he pulled it off, it came off without the paper tearing. So that was the birth of Post-it. So my question to Ogilvy Ramanathan Sridhar is, do these ideas happen by accident or is there a process by which we can unlock great ideas? Sridhar, you are on mute.
Okay. Thank God you were not on mute, so I could hear you, right? So you're asking me as to how ideas occur.
Yeah.
Ideas occur when you're open for it. Like if you keep the windows open, then you can feel the breeze, right? That's the first starting point, that your mind must be open for ideas. The second thing that happens is that if you're curious, if you have an open mind, you're curious, you'll actually constantly keep saying, what if this was combined with this thing, or something else was done? So this what if, why not kind of curiosity leads to a lot of interesting ideas. So my own thing is that one is when you want to explore something. The other thing is what you're currently doing is not working. For instance, if your current medicine is not working, then you want to go for something new, right? So if your current idea is not working for you, then you want to look for new ways of solving the problem. So one is curiosity, where you try various kind of combinations and that can happen. The other thing is to solve a problem. So opportunity and problem solution are two ways in which ideas can occur.
Can you give me some examples that, in your consulting endeavor with ideas are asked, you have encountered that people see things from a particular frame, and then when you change the frame, they see something else?
So, okay, I'll give you, the ZX Spectrum home computer thing that was there, which used to be sold by Computer Point at one time. Now, they thought it is an expensive computer, 5,000 rupees at that time. And they said that only the, well-to-do people will buy this computer, right? And we were going to do some direct marketing work for that. So when we went there, we started talking to the customers, and we realized that they were not the well-to-do people. Okay. Then we went and met customers who had bought these computers. When we went to the household of the affluent, and we said, can you show us the computer? They took it out from the Godrej cupboard in the packing, right? When we went into the middle class households where they had bought the computer, we found the computer was actually connected to the television set, and there was a cassette recorder which had the software, and they were actually using it. So when we said, how come you're using this, and how come you spend 4,000 rupees buying this? And they said, listen, education is the only thing that we can give our children. And that's why we invested in it. So that is the insight, right? Now, the way in which you find this out is that you actually go and talk to users and find out what are they using it for, how are they using it, why are they not using it if at all. These are things that can actually help us get new ideas. But my own point is that you can do all of these conversations, do research, etc. You won't get the ideas if you're not open for it. Most important is you must be willing to accept ideas which are not similar to yours. Very often we try to justify our existing ideas with research, right? And not open enough to new ideas. So most important is to have an open mind and welcome anything that comes in without judgment. That's the most important thing in my view.
Ramanujam, I remember a campaign that you did many years ago, which was for a brand of menswear. I will not name it immediately. But given the fact that, we live in a world where it's a battle of similar products at similar prices, sold from similar outlets by similar people, the only differentiation that happens, and branding is supposed to be differentiation, the only differentiation that happens is the advertising. The advertising is the only differentiator between one brand and the other. Right? I mean, for example, if I ask you what is the difference between Oppo and Vivo, I don't think anyone will be able to tell me. One will say one uses Ranveer, the other will say they use Deepika. I mean, that's the differentiation. But my question to you is taking off from what Ramanathan Sridhar said, which is unless you start with the consumer, because there is no secret in the product, unless you start with the consumer, you won't actually get the idea, which is ideas happen around you in life. So the brand that I was referring to, you would have obviously guessed by now, is Van Heusen. And at a point in time when Van Heusen had at least 6 or 7 competitors, how did you come about, that line, underline your presence? Because that was the first time I saw a brand use body language. And given the fact that communication is 70% non-verbal and 30% verbal, this was the first time that you were using. How did you get there? My question is, how did you get there?
Yeah, good question. I'll try to find the answer. But before that, I think this is a great initiative by the Art Club, and I'd like to thank Mala and Arvind and all the people. All of us deep down first want to be copywriters. So if I had been the copywriter for this, the title of this seminar would be 2 Tambrams and a Bong. Unfortunately, my lines never get accepted. The other title I might have had is 2 Weddings and a Funeral, because you can't have a wedding or a funeral without a tambram. But having said that, I think I'm glad I'm here. I just, it's an interesting question that you asked, SG. And the brand is Van Heusen. And we had a great client as well.
Yes.
So I think
another tambram.
Yeah, I think, though I'm sure he'll be dead before he accepts that. But I think, let me not digress. If you look at Van Heusen as a shirt, it had nothing distinctive. Because at that time, if you remember, Louis Philippe had that upper crest, which was a distinctive feature of the shirt. And you guys had done or were doing Friday dressing. Alan Solly had a distinctive style. Yeah. And this was before Peter England days. And Arrow had that, insignia, whichever. So there was actually nothing distinctive about the brand. So later we did the boardroom shirt, boardroom blacks and all that. But at that time, if you had observed, and this is really where observation comes in, I think Balki and his team, I'll talk a little about the creative process of who had the idea a little as we move on. There is a red line below the logo, which the Van Heusen logo had. So taking that thought, the Underline Your Presence campaign was run. And the other big thing was, this was the time of liberalization. And Indians had a great fixation about foreigners and foreign looking guys. So one of the other features of the commercial was, it was shot in Hong Kong, I think. Every model was a foreigner. The other significant thing is, where do we get our inspiration from? You'll find shades of Godfather in the commercial. Lots of the scenes and the mannerisms are reminiscent of Michael Corleone, and music was Guns N' Roses. So I think one of the key things is, where do ideas, as Sridhar spoke about, keeping your door open or windows open for ideas. I think creative people usually get the ideas from books, from music. I mean, the sources of inspiration that you get are phenomenal. And the point about having an environment where you can get ideas, I think, is very critical. And I think this is something that I, as a manager, try to do, because the ideas can come from anyone. And the youngest people usually have the brightest ideas. Unfortunately, if you say that this will not work, that will be the last time you're going to get an idea from that person. So I think the role of the manager is to create an environment where ideas can flourish. And the role of the senior people is, how do I mold that idea and take it to the next level? So I think it's, to my mind, a collaborative process, and you don't really know where the idea came from. And that's really the strength of the idea. And I remember my briefs were never written. I always believe in a meaningful discussion with the creative people. And that sort of seems to get them to start thinking, rather than you foisting your ideas on them.
So interesting. You made this point about, if you tell a young person who's come up with, I mean, we've heard this many times. Young people come and say, "Hey, I got an idea," and then you hear the idea and say, "Ah, that's all rubbish." That's the end of that guy.
Yeah.
The fact is that we face this all the time. I mean, I'll just give you an example of this. So I worked many years with Chetan Maini in the Reva Electric Car Company. And one of the things that I was working on is, how do you use solar energy to power an electric vehicle so that the carbon footprint is really low, right? So I had this idea of run on sun. Simple idea that electric cars run on sun. So Chetan was absolutely into it, and unfortunately, during that time, Mahindra bought the company. And we actually took this idea to islands. And I remember one of the islands that I visited was Bermuda, and we actually created a prototype of a solar panel charging a car, and they were totally thrilled about it. So how do we get buy-in? I couldn't sell the idea. I could not sell the idea to the board, because the board didn't believe that cars would one day run on solar power, and the board didn't believe that the car would be electric. They were still looking at cars being run on internal combustion engine. So I want to ask a question to Ogilvy Sridhar or Ramanathan Sridhar. What has been your experience of this? You do a session where you generate great ideas, and let's say it is generated at the operating manager level, and it has to go up for investment to either the CXO level or the board level. What has been your experience, and what are the lessons that you can sort of share with us to get a buy-in?
So if you want to get a buy-in for your idea, you have to understand who is the decision maker and who is going to actually put money on the table, right? It's not about your idea anymore. It's about, how is this idea going to meet his objective, right? So the way in which you make a case for your idea is to say, this is what you're looking at. This is your challenge. Start with that, right? And this is what you said you want to crack. Here is an idea. The first thing that you talk about is that these are the current benefits of this idea as we see it, right? And it's not wishful thinking. You actually make a case that way. The next thing that you talk about, you say, if this idea was to be executed, these are the potential gains that we see in the future. Okay? And the last thing that you do is to say that, however, if we have to take this idea into execution, we need to consider the following practical issues. Right? Now, the moment you do that, he actually says that this guy has seen the idea from my perspective. And therefore, it's very often they get into a meaningful discussion about the last section, where we just say, these are the limitations that we anticipate. He might actually turn around, because he's already, if he has bought into the benefit, and he has bought into the potential gains, he will say, listen, the kind of issue that you're raising, many of these may not be relevant. As far as I am concerned, the only issue is this or that, and we'll crack it. I know who are the people who can get. I can get this guy, that guy, from whatever it is. And he is now becoming part of your team which wants to make the idea happen. That's because you helped him buy into the idea by inviting him in and then looking at it from his perspective. If you go there saying, this is my idea, you buy it. In Marathi, there is a saying which says, "Me sangto tu aik." I am telling you, you listen to me. Now, that's not the way you pitch for an idea. You actually say that, look, let's get into this together and make it work. Unfortunately, people who generate ideas don't think of it this way. They're more concerned about proving that it is their idea rather than saying, I want to make this idea work. That's the problem.
So interesting points. I'm just going to change the frame. And since we are all in this electronics and IT city, which is teeming with startup companies, and given the fact that, we all work at some level or the other with startups, this is the same problem that startups face. They have an idea. Many of them have a proof of concept, and they need to raise funds, and then they go to a third party who has never been part of this whole thing. Are there lessons that you can draw from your experience working inside organizations that you could share with the startup community to say that, look, these are the top three things that you need to look at if you want to sell an idea?
Okay. There is a concept called relevance, timeliness, and fit.
Okay.
First is you have to explain the relevance of this, whatever is your idea. Now, there is a question of timeliness. Everybody looking at a variety of priorities, the guy who has to put the money, he must feel that this is the right time to put the money on it.
Mm-hmm.
And the fit is going to serve his cause as well as the other person's cause. Now, if we don't time it right, we actually underestimate the value of timing. Right? You have to be patient. There is no point in rushing through like a bull and then say, buy my idea. You may not buy. You have to wait. You got to really time it right and then pitch it for it. Now, if you've done your homework, you'll also know when is the timing right. There are times I have sold an idea on a campaign for a client in a flight.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That was not meant to be. Okay. The campaign was in the office. We were going to present to him later. But I suddenly found that he was sitting next to me and we were talking about it, and he was in the frame of mind, he was willing to listen. Then I took the risk and sold the campaign and then said, after you get down, I'll show you the campaign. Then we drove straight to the office in Mahalakshmi Chambers and showed him the work later. Right? So that's a risk you took, but then you have to really figure out what is the timing and what is the frame of mind he was in. You have to understand the buyer's frame of mind.
So, that's an interesting point. Ramanujam, question to you is, all of us have sort of come through advertising agencies, and we have basically sold, intangible product, which is, I always said we sold hope. You show a campaign to a customer or a client, and the client, you have to instill hope in him that this will make his product sell like hell. What do you think are the real barriers? Is it fear? Is it that he's answerable to the board or to his superiors? I mean, if it is a marketing director, he's answerable for spending that money. Or is it the fact that he has not bought in, but he doesn't have the gumption to say that to the agency that I don't agree with you. I think the oft repeated phrase would be, can we change this headline? Essentially what he's saying is, can we change the campaign? Yeah. So what has been your learnings that you could sort of, in today's world share that it's still selling an idea, right? And how does that learning benefit the younger generation who are into all kinds of startup businesses?
See, I don't know whether this will replicate in startups, but I'll start with advertising. One interesting point that Sridhar made was that, who's the decision maker, right? I mean, I think that's a very important question. And I had this usual experience, and I used to talk about it to my colleagues. So we'll show a brilliant campaign. he'd love it, but he'll say, I'll get back to you. The reason was he'll check with his spouse and come back next day and say, okay, you can run it. So we knew it, he knew it, the whole world knew it, but I guess advertising and clients operate in different ways. That's one aside. The other point you were talking about, when the client puts the money, when he takes the risk, all that, I'll tell you an actual real life story which happened in Mudra, and we were doing for a brand called Wilman, which is no longer there. It was taken over by Gillette and everything. They launched a new shave foam, and we were shooting the commercial the next day. And they didn't have money, I think 10 lakhs at that time for 4 commercials. And it was 4 10-seconders, new, rich, things like that, all on the foam so that you could see the shave foam. And then you know how Balki's greatest ideas would always come at the last moment. At 4:30 or something on the previous day before the shoot, he said, Sridhar, let's not do this. I've got a different script. And the different script was brilliant. So 8 of us, and that included me, C.K. Venkatraman, the MD of Titan Industries, Balki, Narayan Kumar, Ravi Adivarekar. I mean, all these guys were big guys in that thing, and they all used to work with us. And 8 of us landed up at the client's office at 5:30 in the evening when he was preparing to go home. And he said, what happened? He probably thought all 8 of us are starting a new agency or something. But we said, no, we want to change the film and this is what it is. And he knew it was good. He said, do you think it'll work? I stuck my neck out and said it'll work. And it was a brilliant film. It won awards in New York and all that stuff. So I think the point that you were making is what are clients buying? They're buying your passion more than anything else. If you're convinced and if they know that you have the capability to test out an idea at the script level and figure out that it's going to work. I'm sure SG, you remember the Maggie It's Different commercials when they were first launched.
Yeah.
Apparently this is completely different from whatever Nestle had been doing for the past several years. And yet, because Dennis Joseph stuck his neck out and said it's going to work, they did some commercials which are part of Indian advertising's folklore. So I think more than anything else, I've seen that if the team is passionate about what they're doing, and if the client is convinced that the team has the capability to execute what they're actually saying they're going to execute, you will have a winner. But there is an element of risk, and I agree that we are only 15% of the risk is only with us. 85% of the risk is still with the client. So I think, I think Fielden said this, every client gets what he deserves. So if a client is smart, if a client is risk-taking, and if he's just not willing to say, let's sign on Priyanka Chopra or whatever is the easiest celebrity, I think you'll have great advertising.
So let me sort of shift the bar a little bit, and I'm going to, tell you 2 little stories. One day, Stephen Jobs was visiting Xerox office, and Stephen Jobs saw the graphic user interface in the Xerox office. And he was completely mesmerized by that graphic user interface. And when he asked the Xerox guys, what is it? They just kind of, said, oh, this is nothing. And then he said, do you think I could buy it? He said, yeah, you can buy it. I mean, Xerox did not see the value of the graphic user interface. Okay. So that is one nugget. The second nugget is Nokia, which in the early part of this century owned 70% of the mobile phone market. 70% of the mobile phone market actually had a smartphone. And the smartphone was built on their platform, which is the Symbian OS. They refused to move to Android because Android was an open platform, and you could get developers from all over the world to develop apps. So they refused to move. And when Stephen Jobs in September 2007 launched the smartphone, and when the other phones followed, the world went either iOS or Android, and a multi-billion-dollar, hugely profitable company disappeared. Okay, and the third one is, a brand that we've all grown up with. All our memories are on that brand, which is Kodak. because Kodak was actually a paper printing company. You printed every single image on paper. And when the world moved from imaging on the cloud, moved from paper to imaging on the cloud, Kodak refused to move and they died, right? Now, there are many such instances strewn across the world. I mean, even for example, in India, you have these car companies. I'm sorry, I keep going back to the car because that's where my heart is. You had Premier, Premier Automotive, you had Hindustan Motors. They refused to budge, and then they got wiped out. Now, we all face this kind of a situation that, there is an opportunity out in the market. And the reason why the opportunity is out in the market is because the consumers have changed, right? And if, for example, today, 65% of our consumers are millennials, and the top two concerns of our millennials are health and environment. Read any research that is available. These are the top two concerns. How difficult, Ramanathan, is it to shift people from their zones of comfort where they have got millions of dollars invested in their current capabilities, which is to do with their production, manufacturing, etc., to investing in something which is for the future? How do you crack that? How do you crack that problem?
Incidentally, you just called my father. I don't think he'll be able to come here.
Okay, I'm sorry, Ramanathan Sridhar or Ogilvy Sridhar. I'll go back to Ogilvy Sridhar.
That is okay. So,
but before you proceed, I must tell the audience one story, which is Ramanujam Sridhar used to write a column in the Hindu. And, his writings on cricket were always controversial because he had a very, I would say, an acidic point of view. But the mails would all end up on Ramanathan Sridhar's mailbox. And most of it was hate mail. So that confusion was not only mine, I think it was a national phenomenon. So continue what you were saying.
No, I thought those mails were written by people who were working for me. Okay. So I go to state the question again. I got sort of sidetracked with your joke. Yeah.
Yeah. So my question is that, you have these kind of, large corporations going, down under.
Yeah.
Because new technology has come. So how do you sort of free the mind? How do you remove these mental blocks?
So the thing is that if you really look at, you use the word mental blocks, which is very interesting.
Yeah.
First is saying, what do you think is a mental block? Okay. Now let me define it the way I understand a mental block. I want you to imagine a strange room. Okay. It's got no doors, no windows, no ceiling. And you're inside that room. The height of the wall is 6 feet. Okay. Just outside that room is another room, no doors, no windows, no ceiling. And that room is filled with assumptions, with your assumptions. And there is a third room outside, no doors, no windows, no ceiling. Okay. And the height of the wall is 12 feet. And that is filled with your logic. Now you got to get out of your room. Okay. There is no way in which you can get out of your room in the standard way. Either you have to dig a tunnel and come outside, or somebody comes with a helicopter to pick you up. Now we are all prisoners of our logic and assumptions. Right? And we are all prisoners of our logic and assumption because these seem to be working. It is like saying that, look, I am on some medication. It is working. Why should I change the medicine? All right? And you're telling me all sorts of reasons, but I have no proof. I am actually a prisoner of my success, right? And I'm unwilling to experiment. And that is the problem. So that is also a problem because we lack imagination. Imagination is about what if this was true? What could this future be like? So somebody has to take you on a flight to future. Now, it's quite possible that people who had the idea may not have helped these people see the future in the manner it could have been painted. I'm just sort of making an assumption here.
So, one of the challenges that people at the top, and I think, one of the big challenges every organization has is mental block at the top. Mental block rarely happens at the bottom. And the top, like any bottle, is rather narrow. Okay. How do you break that mental block in a scenario where the decision is not only based on the judgment of the CEO, but it is also based on the judgment of the board. And these are realities of life. And the board may not have any idea about what are the changes which are happening. And there are n number of cases where the companies have been sort of stuck. So to give you an example of that, companies moving from product to service. Okay, so I work with a company where they make a product, but the market has already moved to a service, right? So, for example, what stopped any car company to go into a business like Uber? Uber doesn't own anything. They only own a technology platform. The world's biggest hospitality industry, hospitality company is Airbnb, right? What stops these big corporations to move into these areas which come from nowhere? So the competition to hotel industry did not come from another hotel. It came from somewhere else. It came from basically a technology company. So what do you do with, when you're faced in situations like this? Do you actually take people to the marketplace? Do you make them meet young people? Do you make them meet the future? What do you normally do?
You're asking me or the other Sridhar?
No, I'm asking Ogilvy Sridhar.
Okay. Now, I think first thing I am suggesting is that we approach these people with some level of empathy. I think the way you're sounding is that you're too judgmental about these guys, and I'm getting this anxious feeling that you're treating them like idiots.
Mm-hmm.
I think that you need to understand that if I have a secure home and I found this to be very nice, etc., and tomorrow you just say, listen, you don't need to live here. Why don't you come and live in that kind of place?
Mm-hmm.
It take a lot of time for me to think and shift. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So first thing is you have to have empathy for my position. You have to have the patience to help me see the other world. Very often what happens is we are only talking about the new world through my eyes. I'm not able to help him see the new world the way in which he has to see it. And most important thing is you got to give him time to buy into this. So if you are selling, you're in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
If you're helping him to buy in, then you're in a better position.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have to help him buy in, you need to understand what are his fears and concerns. And he's a human being, right? And then he's in a very secure position and everything is going well. And he's afraid of letting all this go. And what if the whole thing bombs? Correct?
Mm-hmm.
So I think you need to have the empathy to be able to help him buy into this rather than trying to sell him. Now, I also think very often when we take this position that I think this guy is unwilling to change, he is not able to see the future, my body language will tell him that you are an idiot.
Mm-hmm.
You might say, yes, sir, no, sir, and all that, but you'll be saying, say, you're an idiot, sir, and you're not able to see the future, sir, types. And he's not going to buy.
SG, shall we save you?
Yeah, sorry.
I want to save SG.
Yeah. Okay.
SG, I've experienced this. Remember this great brand called BPL that we all worked with?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, 35% market share in that time. Used to make phenomenal televisions and a whole lot of other things. And Japanese, due respect, unfortunately, I'm going to be politically incorrect throughout this whole thing. That's how my entire life has been. Japanese are very arrogant about their own technology and believe the rest of the world doesn't make anything worthwhile. And LG and Samsung had entered the country. And there was research suggesting that the Indian consumer was looking at these Korean brands with interest. And they actually laughed and threw us out of the room when we went and said that, I think you should be worried about this. Was research done by IMRB. So I think the point is many companies are afraid of, if it ain't broke, why fix it, seems to be the syndrome. And I agree completely with Sridhar in terms of that you must approach them empathetically because this has got them success so far. And people who challenge the status quo like Steve Jobs are so rare and so infrequent that even if you see them in the middle of the road, I'm sure we won't be able to recognize them because we are ordinary mortals. So I think this is a very interesting situation that we are in. And the solution is to have, as you say, surround yourself with young people so that you don't age. IBM had this concept of reverse mentoring where, when social media and everything started to become very active, have a 22-year-old tell a director how to post videos on Facebook, etc. Because these are the things that you need in today's world. If I am to communicate, if I am to understand what the consumer is saying, this is even more true in the case of a country like India, which has so many young consumers, and we have talked to death about it. So I think the solution is, how do I mix this balance of youth and experience so that we don't miss? And the other important thing that I'd like to do is actually go out in the market and see the change that's happening around you.
Absolutely.
Unfortunately, many of us, advertising types for the focus group, they're not part of the focus group. And I'm going to tell you a story which is, probably better told in Madras, but I will still tell it to you. This is said by Shiv Kumar. Pond's, the greatest brand that ever launched a talcum powder, wanted to launch toothpaste in Madras, and it was a dismal flop. And the lady said, the Mailapur Mami said, who would think of putting what you put under your armpits into your mouth? So, the greatest marketing company when I was young, Ponds, didn't find this simple truth. But that was because you're not part of the focus group. You're missing seeing the key findings which the market research company does. You're not doing sales rounds. So I think it's very, very important that unless you throw yourself into the category, you're not going to come out with something very, very distinctive.
Very true. Absolutely.
Interesting point, Ramanujam, you made. Again, I'm referring to your dad, but do excuse me. I have. Otherwise, I'll keep on calling you Mudra Sridhar, since you're no longer in
At least
Mudra.
call me Brandcom Sridhar, yeah.
Anyway, so I think what you're also alluding to, I think both of you are alluding to something, which is, in a competitive world, if you want to find ideas, you have to work with insights.
Yes.
Is what is below what you see on the surface, and how do you get to those insights? People like Balki or people like Piyush. While you were talking, I'm reminded of something which happened. I don't know whether it is a myth, legend, or reality. That Piyush was actually playing around with, Fevikwik in his office, and a coin had dropped in his glass, and he took a pencil. He put Fevikwik at the bottom of the pencil, and he put it inside, and he picked up the coin. And that gave rise to possibly one of the best campaigns which ever Fevikwik ran. And, obviously it was quite a famous campaign. And if you really think the impact of that idea on the consumer mind, I would request everybody in the audience, including our good friend Ambi, who just put up a question. Tell me, what is the second brand? Who is Fevikwik's competitor? And I think Fevikwik is a great example of an idea that creates a category of one. And to be in a category of one, there are very, very few products that you can think of where an idea has created this whole phenomenon of being in a category of one. So moving on to the next section, somebody asked this question, that what is a good idea? So one is, we've discussed the source of idea. And the other is like, how do you get a buy-in into the idea? And what stops people from buying in are these mental blocks. But I think, again, I'm going back to the startup world. One of the questions that all VCs, they ask, and since I started 2 companies of my own, and I have had to face this question: how scalable is this idea? How many people will buy into this idea, right? To give an understanding of what I'm saying is, Dhirubhai Ambani had this idea of a phone call cheaper than the cost of a postcard to revolutionize communication in India. That was the beginning, and Reliance Communication used to be one of our clients. So I remember that phrase being used often. And then you had Ratan Tata, who launched the 1 lakh rupee card, which obviously was never priced at 1 lakh rupees. One succeeded and the other failed. One succeeded means it succeeded in a different avatar, which is the Geo, and the other failed. So my question to both of you is, why did one succeed and why did one fail?
I can talk about the one that failed. I think, when you say, It was actually the poor man's car, whatever. That's what I think the positioning of Tata Nano was the biggest problem. And I'm sure Ambi will have reams to talk about it. But I think the fact is a car is still a status symbol in India. And if you say affordable and things like that, when somebody is buying what would probably a once in a lifetime purchase, it's really a case of not getting it right. As far as Reliance is concerned, I think the guiding principle, and I used to work with Reliance for the impressionable years of my life, I felt that they really dreamt big. I mean, there was no question of thinking of anything which was not global, anything which was not going to be the biggest. And I think that sort of rubbed off on everything that they did. And obviously, they had other things working for them. But I think still the starting point was that is probably that Walt Disney's line of you can dream it, you can do it. So I think the starting point was that let's start with a really big project which is global, which is comparable with anything that the rest of the world can dish up. And then, your chances of success, maybe you can also end up with mud on your face, but I think the chances of making it really big were quite different from, so they thought very, very differently from anybody else that I had sort of worked with.
So are you saying the scale at which you think, so you have an idea and the scale at which you think in terms of executing that idea also determines the path that you take, right?
I was talking about this yesterday. For example, cricket, 75, 79, 83. The first 3 World Cups were held in England because they thought nobody else can run the World Cup. In 87, we had it in India and Reliance was the sponsor. And, everybody thought that this is going to be a fiasco. We can't do anything. How are we going to run this? And today, when we talk about IPL and all that, we must remember that 33 years ago, India actually ran a World Cup, which was wonderfully run. So we had the capability and Reliance had the capability to pitch for it and make it happen.
So, Ogilvy Ramanathan Sridhar, this is a question to you, which I'm really getting tired of this,
No, it's all right.
Just say ideas, Sridhar. No?
Ideas, Sridhar. Okay, that is a good one. The Brandcom Sridhar was ideas. So here's a question to you, which is, we have often heard sitting in our offices, some, young guy walks in and say, hey, I got a great idea, right?
Yeah.
Now, and that great idea, and you possibly think that it's actually a good idea. But when you go to the challenge of scaling that idea in terms of execution, because now we're talking about execution, and when you start to scale that idea, that's where the big challenges happen, and that's where big bucks are required.
Yeah.
So are the mental blocks that happen also related to the fact that the capability of an organization to scale an idea which makes money for them, right? Somebody asked this question, what is a good idea? So I will answer that at the end of the session. That this is the scalability, the investment required for that scalability. And we all know the kind of money that both these companies, Tata's as well as Reliance, has spent. Is that a mental block? Is that what stops people?
I think scalability is probably not the mental block. The fear of failure is the mental block. Right? If I put in this kind of thing and we go into this kind of scale, and if that fails, I mean, that's a huge loss, embarrassment, whatever it is. And it's really the fear. It's not about, if somebody else is, I mean, I'm not putting my personal money, right? Okay. But if I'm making this recommendation and making this scaling up kind of stuff that happens and it fails, then that's the concern I have.
So how do you judge whether, is an idea scalable? Like what is it that you will measure?
So what is the risk you're willing to take is the issue. In the case of people like us, where we are not putting in our money, we are asking our clients to put in the money. I mean, I don't want to be seen as a guy who's making a recommendation that's going to fail. Okay. So here is an interesting story where when we were when I was in Bangalore, we had Infosys as our client. Okay. And there was one recruitment ad which was sent across, right? It was supposed to be some 15 by something, a small size recruitment ad. And Infosys was actually becoming big, and they were actually going to be competing with TCS kind of stuff, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
And I had met Mr. Narayan Murthy, I met Nandan. These were the early days before they went public, okay?
Mhm.
And they're talking about their dreams about being big and so on and so forth. And when I saw this small little ad, somehow I felt that it was not in line with their ambition and dreams. So you know what we did? We actually created a full page Times of India recruitment ad,
Mhm.
okay? But with a complete text on how they will get employees who are coming in, prospective employees who are coming in, will get an appointment letter within 24 hours if they are the right people. And we gave a
Mhm.
whole lot of stuff. Then knowing Mr. Murthy, I said, we need to have something which makes it making sense for him. So we said, let's not spend the entire full page space. If you take it up to 40 centimeters, Times of India cannot put any other ad on top,
Mhm.
right? So in effect, you're getting the full page value for less than full page price,
Mhm.
right? Then we composed the entire ad and we went and showed it to Mr. Murthy and he was willing to back it. Okay? But the point is, you need to be able to think big, help them to see big. At the same time, they also want to see that you're spending their money responsibly. You're not really, taking a ride on their money. That's the kind of concern, and we must address that concern. We can't shy away from it.
So, business organizations generally like measure everything in terms of profitability. Any business organization would measure something in terms of profitability. There are many projects where profits, may accrue. For example, if you take all these big value companies, whether it's Flipkart or whether you take Paytm or any one of these, unicorns, if you look at their balance sheet, they're all red. But if you look at their valuation, they're valued at billions and billions of dollars, right? Somebody backed the idea, and somebody backed the idea because something went on in their mind in terms of at scale, right? What will it deliver? Is there a measure? Is there a mechanism that you have seen that is you know that is prevalent where you can actually measure the idea? So, for example, let me give you an example. Uh, most startup companies would have something called proof of concept, which is A, it works, and B, acceptability amongst consumers, right? Those two kind of combine to give proof of concept. How do you measure it at scale? Is that a challenge, or is there a belief that it will work? Is there something beyond rational that makes you back the idea? And how do you get to that space?
It's very difficult for me to answer this question. The parallel I can think of is the movie business.
Yes, I was
Right.
hoping you would come there.
Yeah. So the thing is that when Sholay was being made, right, the story has it that this guy was actually thinking of shooting a western in this country. Okay, the
Mhm.
first time kind of thing, and the kind of investment to be made and so on. So the CPs were to be doing that, and this guy only painted the dream for him, and he was willing to buy into that dream and put the money on it, right? So it's I think I have not really dealt with this kind of issue, so it's very difficult for me to relate it. But I could only think of Sholay as an example where somebody thought really big and made it work. So it's question of how passionate are you about the dream, and how passionately are you able to convince the other person to see your dream. I mean, this is probably it.
Ramanujam, Sridhar, any comment on that?
See, I still think that old adage 50% of my advertising money is wasted, trouble is, which 50% is absolutely true today as well.
Right.
And thankfully, I'm not in the advertising business. But I think if I look at social media, it's perhaps far more accountable than advertising was. It's a lot like direct response, and I'm sure Sridhar will be able to talk about this at greater length than I can. But I think we are moving towards an era of more accountability where advertising actually delivers. And I think the greatest thing, unfortunately, still is your judgment. I can look at all the numbers. I can look at all that, that the research shows, and, of the great advertising ideas that have been killed by research. We know all that. We have grown up on that. So I think somewhere along the line, I still go back to my thing that every client gets what he deserves. And if you have the good fortune to have a client who's smart, sensible, and who can recognize the potential of a great idea, you will have good advertising. So I think it's takes two to tango, and both clients and agencies have to work closely together. I'll give you a quick example of Hindustan Lever. If you compare their advertising in 1980 to their advertising in 2020, you will see that they're streets ahead in terms of creativity. If you look at some of the Surf Excel campaigns, starting from Lalita ji to whatever's happened with so I think clients also tend to improve. Clients also tend to value creativity far more than they used to do in the past. So it's the role of the agency as well to take the client along in this path of creative and better outcomes. So I think it's a joint partnership, and when we say partnership, we really must mean it. Otherwise, it will just remain on paper.
So, I mean, we are out of time. So it's nice that you ended this with the example of Hindustan Unilever. This is a client that all of us have worked on, and great respect for what Unilever does. I think one of the guiding principles of what Unilever does in terms of a good idea is, does it make a sustainable difference to people's lives? And does it do that at profit to the company? And does it do that with enormous benefits to the consumer? Would you agree with my statement? Would you both agree with that statement, that the definition of a good idea doesn't matter where it comes from, doesn't matter what mental blocks you faced, doesn't matter how you got the buy-in. At the end of the day, it is finally to do with the consumer. Did it make a
I would say that it is about, is it doing what is meant to do? That is a simpler thing. Whatever is the idea, is it likely to do what is meant to do?
Yeah, I think so. And I think, SD, the point you made about, is it making a difference? I think there's a greater concern about the environment, the greater concern about sustainability, things that we didn't give a shit about when we were young. I think that big change is happening, and your consumer is younger. You got to realize that there is a greater concern for the environment, and your advertising better reflect that.
So we are out of time. Both the Sridhars, thank you very much. So to wrap it up, I would just say that ideas can come from anywhere, but the best place where ideas come from is when you are in that space in your mind where you don't know that you don't know. And that's where all discovery happens. That's where all music happens. That's where all painting, art, everything happens. That's one. Two is, you got to be passionate about your idea, and you got to believe that it can make a change. And you got to have patience to sell the idea, to break down the mental blocks. And you got to get a buy-in from all the stakeholders who are going to be part of that process. But at the end of the day, an idea also needs to be communicated, which is an idea not communicated doesn't actually move. So the main thing about scalability is, how well did you communicate the idea, right? I mean, we all talk about Stephen Jobs. I think Stephen Jobs was the greatest storyteller in the world of business. So what carries great ideas forward are great stories. So I'd like to end with that, and Q&A session. Anyone? So there are some questions which I'll pick one. There was one question by Abhishek. He says, when we are talking about Nokia and Kodak versus iPhone, aren't we falling prey to the survivorship bias and hindsight fallacy?
SG, you have to answer that question. You were the one who spoke.
Correct. Yeah. Well said, Sridhar. I agree with you.
So Abhishek, yes, hindsight is always 24/24. But fact of the matter is that somebody saw it. For example, Stephen Jobs saw it. The digital companies saw it. The reason why incidentally, Kodak invented the digital camera. It's not that some other company invented the digital camera. The guy who invented the digital camera quit Kodak, right? And the buy-in didn't happen because they got stuck in their comfort zone. So I think the greatest enemy of ideas are the comfort zones. And you got to, when you are in a technology cycle where technology is changing everything, right? It's changing every single part of our lives. You got to constantly ask this question, that are we ahead of the curve or are we following the curve? So Kodak had the opportunity of being ahead of the curve. Nokia had the opportunity of being ahead of the curve, but they didn't. They followed the curve.
SG, you can take two more questions.
Yeah, I will take one more question.
Yeah.
What about the loyalty factor among millennials? Millennials are very flirtatious with brands and ideas. So how do you build loyalty amongst the millennials? Is a
I
question.
have a question. I have a question. Why should you build any loyalty? Right?
Okay. Okay.
Just focus on delivering what they need and what they want. Right? So I think this loyalty thing is a very misleading thing in my view.
Okay. So we'll take one more question. Let's see. What are the other questions people have?
So you can mail it to us and we'll answer them. No, seriously.
Okay, here's the last one from Sanya Kriplani. Isn't the painted picture that sells? It's both an art and science. I'm not sure I understand that question. Isn't the painted picture that sells? It's both an art and science. And I would assume that art and science, in the sense that today you can actually, thanks to digital media, you can actually track everything that is happening. You can also find insights on real time. So I guess that's where it is coming from.
Shall I respond to that?
Yeah, please.
Yeah.
So I think, isn't that painted picture that sells? When we were young, we thought a picture paints 1,000 words. So we always said the visual is far more important than, the words, because people would see first and then read and all that stuff. I think the way I understand this, there are two things. It's how interesting you say, which is the storytelling part. And the second is the relevance, which Sridhar spoke about. So I think I need to paint a picture, but I need to paint a picture that's true. I need to paint a picture that's representative and relevant to you. So I think it's the old advertising conundrum that we used to have between hardworking and rewarding. So I still have to marry the two. And I still think whatever you do has to make relevance to the customer and yet hold her attention enough for her to open her wallet. So I think the same principles that we're talking about are being used perhaps more dramatically, more aesthetically, more esoterically, but it's still the same, hardworking, relevant, and yet distinctive. That's really what we're trying to do all the time.
Ignite their imagination. I think that's a very important part there. Yeah.
So thank you, both of you. This has been a very interesting session to moderate. Historic moment where
Okay.
both the Sridhar, I had a tough time, trying to figure out how to address you. Should it be Mudra Sridhar, or should it be Ogilvy Sridhar, or should it
You
be...
usually got it wrong. It doesn't matter.
You should have said Daddy Sridhar and Bald Sridhar. That should have been all right.
Anyway, thanks guys, and thanks to everybody in the audience, or whatever you want to call it. Lots of friends there. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Arvind, you want to say something?
Where is the
Yes.
memento, yaar?
Mementos will be couriered to you. No point in giving you a virtual memento, but
Okay.
jokes apart, thank you so much, Sridhar Ramanathan and Sridhar Ramanujam and SG for readily agreeing and for this program. I think it's been a wonderful idea, and I must also thank the three of you for all the time that you have spent over the last week with us in terms of fine-tuning the whole thing. I think it has actually fallen into place, and I'm sure the audience would have enjoyed it. I must also thank Ganapati and Bijoya from AdGully, who have been our online partners, and Umanath from Media News for You, who have been very cooperative, very supportive, and to all our Ad Club committee members who went all out in trying to promote this whole thing on the social media. apart from our panelists and our moderator. And I think overall it, got the kind of, receptivity that we wanted and we were looking at. So thank you very much, Sridhar, both the Sridhars and SG once again. Look forward to, keeping in touch with you.
Yeah. Thank you,
so
Arvind.
much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you.